Okay, so we're going to look now at another urban opportunity, and we're going to look at this idea of urban regeneration. And our area for that we're going to study, particularly in Newcastle, is called Newcastle Quayside. Now, the Quayside area of Newcastle is located down on the river, and would originally have had an economy based on shipbuilding. And kind of, if you were to go back into the sort of 19th century, Newcastle would have had a huge shipbuilding industry, and that would have been going on well into kind of the 1950s. However, what's happened is the shipbuilding industry of the UK has declined. Much of that has moved to cheaper competition in the low-income parts of the world, and therefore Newcastle Quayside saw a real period of decline where the area became run down, businesses left, there was high unemployment, and the area addition became an example of deprivation within the city. Newcastle City Council therefore attempted to regenerate the area. Now, in the exam, it's likely that you would be asked to not just describe what they've done in terms of the urban regeneration or redevelopment, but assess the impacts of it and look at whether or not it's been positive or negative. So that's what we do want to consider, is the positives of the regeneration and the negatives. Now, one of the things that they did in Newcastle Quayside was take many of the old factories and warehouses that had been involved in the shipbuilding and convert it into high quality modern housing. Now, this housing was apartment blocks and flats designed to attract young professionals into the city centre of Newcastle. They were very high quality, very well presented, and made the area really attractive. However, on the negative side, they were unaffordable for the people that had predominantly lived in Newcastle Quayside before the redevelopment. This meant that loads of people had to move out of the area. On top of that, Newcastle has a major shortage of family housing. 13 families are leaving Newcastle every week, and the majority of the homes built in Newcastle Quayside, as I said, were flats or apartments, not ideal for family living. So, we can look at the social positives and the social negatives there. One of the other things that they tried to do in Newcastle Quayside was improve the cultural opportunities available. Okay, and one of the things that they did with that was create the Sage Centre. Now, I've kind of drawn it a bit like a shell because it does kind of look like that from the outside. Now, the Sage Centre is a large music concert venue in Newcastle Quayside. It's had some significant bands play it, such as the Chainsmokers and Mumford & Sons. So obviously that's created a really positive social and cultural opportunities. That's combined with the creation of the Baltic Center. Now, the Baltic Center is a contemporary art gallery. It's one of the most prestigious contemporary art galleries in Europe. And again, it was built in an old factory or mill in Newcastle Quayside. So they've used an old building and redeveloped it into something new and modern. This has obviously created a huge amount of interest and visitors to the area, which has made economic gains. That kind of then leads us on nicely to the next one. So we've got our social opportunities that have been provided here and the social negatives. We're now going to look at the economic opportunities and positives and negatives. The creation or the redevelopment of Newcastle Quayside into this kind of social and cultural hub of Newcastle has created 5,000 new tertiary jobs. Okay, working, for example, in the music concert hall, the Sage Centre or the art gallery, or in the 30 or so bars that kind of cover the 1 mile area that Newcastle Quayside takes up. The positive of this is the creation of a huge amount of jobs, and normally well-paid jobs. We say that tertiary or service jobs are normally much better paid than the original jobs that would have been in Newcastle Quayside doing the shipbuilding. The problem is, the negative of that is that the people living originally in Quayside would not have had the skills available to access these kind of jobs. They wouldn't have had the qualifications. So most of the jobs ended up going to people from outside of the Quayside area, not to the local people. Finally, then, we've done social, economic. We then need to look at our environmental. Newcastle Quayside has obviously attempted to improve the environmental quality of the area. One of the things that they've done is created a beach on the riverside. Okay, that's got several really trendy kind of bars and what they call rum shacks around it, and they've really attempted to improve the environmental area by planting trees along the banks of the river, and instead creating this beach area. One of the other things that they've done as well, they focus on the water quality of the River Tyne, and now actually every year they hold a fishing festival on the River Tyne because the quality was so good that there's a large fish population in it. That was definitely something that wouldn't have been the case during the shipbuilding era. However, there have been some environmental problems. Obviously, the large amount of bars and restaurants in the area, we said over 30 earlier, that has increased the amount of litter and therefore pollution and land pollution in that area. And also one of the big concerns has been the amount of noise pollution, late night party goers coming out into the area once the bars and restaurants have shut, which has detracted from the improvements to the environmental quality. So as I said, you need to consider the positives and negatives. So in the exam, I'd be thinking Newcastle Quayside is an example of redevelopment. There have been many social, economic and environmental advantages to this, and also some disadvantages, and you will need to blend that argument and then come up eventually with a conclusion about whether or not you think Newcastle Quayside has been a positive or negative redevelopment scheme.